Saludos and salutations, Broncos country. Welcome to another exciting episode of Broncos Talk. I am your host, Adan Diaz, and I am joined by my co-host to my right, Ed Richie. Richie, my friend, how are you today?
Not bad. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, Richie. Thank you so much for asking. And ladies and gentlemen of Broncos country, it is an exciting week because it is draft week. It is the week that we as Broncos fans are super excited before we get to see on draft day who it is that the Broncos are going to select for the upcoming picks that they have that are going to be a part of the future of this football team. Now, Rich, we were scared. Actually, let me rephrase that. We are scheduled to make your top 10 and my top 10, and then we'll try to see if we can get the viewers' top 10 picks as we go along for who we think each team is going to take in the draft. But before we get to that, we had some very breaking news that happened just before we went on the air today, Rich. And that is the acquisition of one Teddy Bridgewater from the Carolina Panthers. The quarterback who was the starter for them last season is coming to Denver this coming season after the Broncos traded a 6th-round pick. And they're due about $3 million plus a 1.5 bonus, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere along those lines.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot of money eaten up by the Panthers, which is really good for us. So we got him for I think it worked out to like $3.5 million or something like that.
Yeah, that's actually true. And let me just say, Rich, that I've been racking my brain trying to think about whether this is good or bad news for Denver. Not so much about draft, but just in general. Now, while I do think that it can be, I can see where people have some like an issue or a problem with this. I'm trying to look at the positive, and the positive is just that this can actually help push Drew Lock. And that's saying if Drew Lock is still a member of this team come September. My whole thing is that I think that maybe they could be dangling Drew Lock as a carrot in terms of, hey, if anybody wants to, get Drew Lock, let's say Detroit, if Denver wants to, move up a spot or two, they can use Drew Lock as a trade bait to get Denver up there. If whoever they want in terms of like another quarterback, they can get. And the reason I say that is I came to that conclusion because I was reading an article, and I don't remember where I read it, but they made a very good point where in 2012, the Seattle Seahawks signed Matt Flynn to a pretty big contract, and then in that same draft, they went ahead and chose Russell Wilson. And then in another example, the Philadelphia Eagles, they signed Sam Bradford, and then they went and chose Carson Wentz. So we could be looking at a situation that is almost equivalent to those two previous situations on our hands, Rich.
The only difference is that so Sam Bradford was old ish, and I mean, let's be honest, he spent more time in a hospital ward than he did on the football field. And when you also look at the Russell Wilson thing, I don't think, I guess what I'm trying to differentiate here is those were unintentional quarterback competitions. And in the case of Carson Wentz, that wasn't really a quarterback competition. That was, we basically rented a guy from a hospital bed who we think will be back there by, mid-season anyway. And Carson Wentz is in fact our future. In the case of Russell Wilson, that was an unintentional quarterback competition. And I think if you were to ask Pete Carroll, in 20 years from now, or 10 years from now, because he's kind of old, but in 10 years from now, I think he would pretty much outright tell you, no, we never intended to have that as a quarterback competition. We thought Russell Wilson would take 1 or 2 years to develop and then turn into, the guy he is now. And I think he just shocked them to say, oh, wow, he is really mentally with it and much further along than we thought. So I'm pushed back a little bit on the narrative of this helping Drew. I would actually argue that any form of open quarterback competition, as I've said in our previous pods, does not work. And in fact, when you look back at any intentional quarterback position, the general outcome, in fact, in all cases that I have been able to personally find, and if someone else has an example where I am wrong, please tell me, because I very well could be. But in all cases, both quarterbacks, both the incumbent and the one that was brought in to compete for the quarterback spot to start, both have failed.
Mm-hmm. Very well said, my friend. And before we continue on this topic, let's go and say hello to our live viewers who are in our chat room today. Folks, let's say hi to Mohammed Badri, who says hashtag amazeballs.
Well,
Thank you
actually,
so
our
much, my
hashtag
friend.
is tall and bearded, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that too. Shadowjacker, welcome to the show, my friend. He says, I'm so confused by today's move. We trade a 6th-round pick for another mediocre quarterback. And I will actually address your statement after I get done saying hello to everybody in the room. Albert Knoppers, hello, my friend. How are you doing today? Mahai Prophet, hello, my friend. He says, who are you
How you
calling a
doing?
gentleman? I love that.
That is so kind of you. I appreciate that.
I love that Stooges bit. Miguel Santisteban, I hope I said your last name right. Welcome to the show, my friend. He says, I think it was a good deal. I really think we are going to trade back now. Very interesting, my friend. Ivan Diaz, my cousin, thank you so much for watching. He says, LMFAO, hospital ward. I believe he liked your joke there.
I think he did.
Mr. Boggins, loyal co-host of the Mile High Roundtable, and who did a very excellent job on yesterday's episode with Orange Weekly. If you haven't guys seen it, please make sure to watch it after this show. He says, I'm not sure how this isn't a good move. And Josh Batts, I hope I said your last name right. Welcome to the show. He says, love the trade. Good veteran quarterback that will help with our hopefully 1st-round quarterback. So kind of going back, and look, just at the last second, Orlando Begay, welcome to our friends. He says, go Broncos.
Thank you.
So going back to what Boggins said, I do think this is a very good move. This was something that the Broncos were going to do when free agency started. They were just trying to see, who was hanging around out there in terms of veteran leadership. And had Alex Smith not retired, Rich, we could have ended up with an Alex Smith on our hands. Who knows? But this is a very good insurance policy for the Broncos should they decide not to go quarterback choice in the 1st round or at all during the draft, mind you. So I think it's a very good move. It's going to make for a very interesting training camp, to see if those two guys are standing still by the time OTAs and all the training camp and whatever rolls around, who's going to be the number one guy. And even though I'm a Drew Lock supporter, and I say this all the time, I support 100% whoever the coaching staff decides to say, hey, this is going to be our starter for week 1. They're going to have my support, whether it's Drew Lock or it's Teddy Bridgewater or a quarterback that they should happen to choose in the draft.
I mean, I'm looking at it from 2 angles here. So one is I'm only concerned that this will hinder Drew Lock's development if we choose to go in that direction. So Teddy Bridgewater will likely look good just because he is, in my opinion, a better fit for the Pat Shurmur offense than Drew Lock is. And given the fact that he is a savvy veteran, by all accounts, he's a very sharp guy. From all I've been able to find out on him, even leading up to this, he's a very high character guy, which, I mean, I think that's a great pickup from that perspective for us. The concern that I have is I think he can start looking like the new and shiny, and potentially divert attention away from us developing Drew. And that is what my concern is that I think that we have given up on developing a quarterback to fit within our system. And frankly, I also think we've not really selected an identity on our offense either, which is an issue as well. So that's my concern. And as I stated earlier, I really don't want this to turn into, and I'm going to cringe, and you're going to probably see it all the way from where you are, and you'll see me even north of the border cringing if I hear the words quarterback competition come out of either of our coaches' mouths when they start announcing Drew and Bridgewater together.
Well, I'm actually kind of intrigued to see what kind of, if they can kind of reconcile the magic that Teddy Bridgewater had when he was selected by the Vikings in Minnesota and Pat Shurmur, and they played some pretty good offense up there in the NFC North. They gave the Lions, the Bears, and even the Packers a run for their money for a while. It wasn't until Bridgewater suffered that unfortunate injury that almost sidelined his career. So I just think that I think that Peyton did a really good job. Me honestly, there were rumors that Bridgewater was a choice for them to pick, so I was kind of getting myself ready for it. So when it finally happened, I just want to make sure that I didn't get completely off guard by it. So, and to quote, he actually read my mind when he said this: "You're replacing Driscoll with Bridgewater, who has the potential to play better than Drew. Drew had his unquestioned opportunity." And as big as a Drew Lock supporter fan that I am, Rich, unfortunately, Mr. Boggins is right. Drew Lock had his chance to go out there and be the guy that we all thought he was the season before and who we all wanted it to be, but unfortunately it didn't happen. So now that his feet are being held against the fire, if he does happen to stick around for another season, his number one spot, starting position, isn't guaranteed.
I agree, but to stay consistent kind of with some of the stuff that I said before, first off, my stance is pretty clear on this. It is a statistical anomaly and an unlikely outcome that Drew will actually succeed as a quarterback for our team, just given historical precedents to date in the NFL. So that's full stop, period. However, I also think that our team did not do Drew any favors. I think that Drew and his skill set and what he does fits far better with what Scangarello did rather than what Shurmur did. And we ripped the OC that was clearly working with him when we went 4-1 at the end of the season prior and replaced him with Shurmur. And the outcome was not spectacular. So I just think that we did not really do Drew any favors last season. That said, I also agree with you because I have also said that Drew knew full well that he was the guy last year. I mean, and he did nothing really to elevate himself, at least that you could visually see, particularly at the beginning of the season. However, we did start to see some marked improvements in progress, particularly near the back end of the season, which as a Broncos fan, you have to be pretty pleased about. So in my opinion, I think bringing in Bridgewater may send the wrong message to Drew, and it's not something that I would personally have done or wanted us to do. We did it. He's a Bronco now, Bridgewater, so I'm going to be cheering for him regardless, but I just think that it could potentially hinder what we have with Drew Lock, and I think that might be a mistake that we might regret later.
Okay. Miguel Santisteban, he chimes in. He says, I think the only quarterback we should draft is Trey Lance. He isn't ready to start day one and can sit back for the year. Bridgewater is the failsafe for the year if Lock doesn't work, and you will have Lance there next year. Now, I'm not going to agree or disagree with you, Miguel, because I know little to almost nothing about these prospects coming in, whether they're quarterbacks or wide receivers or what. I just do my research literally when the NFL season is over just to see who won college championship and, you know, who's being touted or whatever, whoever Boggins tells me to vote for or to root for, I should say. So, but you could be right. You know, they are. And Rich and I are going to talk about this when we get to our predictions for the top 10 in just a little bit. But you could be right. I mean, Trey Lance has been hyped up to be, you know, the so-called quote. I believe he said it himself that he's the best quarterback. There are analysts that say Mac Jones is the best quarterback. You know, Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence. I mean, you don't really need to say anything about him because he's pretty much guaranteed his spot in Jacksonville. And if it were up to me, I'd literally just skip over Jacksonville and go straight to number 2 tomorrow night.
I mean, hasn't he already been handed his card?
Probably.
Like, doesn't he already own the number 1 pick with the Jacksonville Jaguars jersey on it already? If I could just jump off of Miguel's comment there, because I see this is kind of where I'm not bouncing all over the place. I believe it or not, although I am a little bit, you know, bouncing here, I've been fairly consistent on this as well. I hate quarterback competitions. However, if our intention is in fact to either stay put at 9 and draft a QB or trade up and draft a QB, in my opinion, what we just did today with Teddy Bridgewater is actually a pretty good option for our team. However, I think at this point here, we should then be trading Drew. Because like I said, I don't like quarterback competitions because I don't believe they work. So if your intent is to say as a team, as the Denver Broncos, Drew is not our guy, we need to trade Drew, get the draft capital back that we can for him, perhaps even trade Drew mid-draft or in the draft to maybe obtain a second-round pick to almost get us a direct comp back for what we drafted him at as the round 2. Because I do think that if we can load up on an extra round 2 pick this year, there are some really, really solid round 2 guys that we can pick up to make our team better both this year and into the future if we intend to target and go after a quarterback in round 1.
Okay, very well said, my friend. And, you know, with that, if we have time, Rich, I'd like to circle back to the whole Bridgewater thing towards the end of the show. But, let's get to the actual title of today's show, and that's your top 10 versus my top 10. And then to our live audience, if you guys want to chime in, I'm going to write down everybody's answers in terms of who you think when that team, when their name is called out of the top 10, who's going to go where. So, Rich, without further ado, I'm going to write stuff down. So if I'm not looking at the camera, I do apologize to our live audience. Obviously, we have to talk about pick number 1. So I'm going to say Trevor Lawrence.
No way.
What say you?
Can we just move on to pick 2?
I need you to say it for the record, my friend.
Okay. That's Trevor Lawrence all day long.
Okay. And to our chat audience, what do you guys say? Who do you think the Jaguars are going to pick in round 1? So I'm just going to go ahead and write your answer for you ahead of time, just so we can move on to pick number 2, which is the New York Jets. So the New York Jets, there are 3 of those 4 quarterbacks left, Rich, and I'm actually going to say, and I'm pretty sure everybody's said this already more than likely, but I'm going to say Zach Wilson for the Jets.
See, I went back and forth on this, and I actually had the Jets. I have the Jets. I think the Jets might surprise some people. I think everyone's just expecting them to go Zach Wilson, and I haven't seen anything come out of their organization to indicate that they're definitively going in that direction. I'm going to say that I think the Jets go with Justin Fields.
Ooh, Justin Fields.
Yeah, I think he's a great little mix for them, and I think that the Jets organization is, they've been a bit of a dumpster fire for quite some time. And I think that the ownership is understanding of the fact that they're going to take a little bit of time to build and grow. And I think that with the new coach and there's going to be a little bit of slack, if you will. And I think that with a new rookie quarterback, he'll be fine.
And I don't know if this is regarding you, but Mr. Boggin says, of course you do, LOL. And Albert Knoppers thinks that the Jets will take Trey Lance.
Yeah, so Albert and I are on similar pages there. I just think that they haven't confirmed or denied or said anything to kind of indicate that like they are absolutely going in that direction with I think everyone's just assuming that they're going to go with Zach Wilson. And I could totally see every year in every draft, there's always like 2-3 players that you're saying, I can't believe that team drafted that person instead of the one that we all thought. And then there's a couple players that get picked like so late in the draft in round 1 that everyone's, touting them as like the steal of round 1 because they were taken so much later than they were. So I have a funny feeling that pick 2 may be the time where we start seeing that.
Right. I do agree with you. So number 3 in terms of choosing is the San Francisco 49ers, who traded their way up. And, after hearing about so much about who they going to pick, Jimmy G is still supposedly on the market for, being up to trade. There's a lot of speculation that he could go back home to where he initially started with New England. So I'm going to say Mac Jones for the 49ers. What say you, Rich?
I have the Niners taking Mac Jones as well.
Oh, okay. So
I'm sorry. No crazy controversial pick there. No, I think this is where a lot of the other, pundits and draft analysts and stuff like that, this is where it's almost like one of those things where like, there's no way they're taking Mac Jones. I was like, no, they're a pick 3 and they basically like in Kyle Shanahan's presser. So this is the difference. And this is why I said what I did about New York as compared to the 49ers. One of the members of the press corps in the 49ers press conference said, the fans hate the fact that there's talk of you drafting Mac Jones. And Shanahan actually got like upset. Like visually, he kind of started pushing back and kind of getting angry. And I think that's kind of the opposite to what we've seen from New York. They haven't said like nothing has come out to indicate that they're all over Zach Wilson, right?
Right. And Albert Knoppers agrees with us in Mac Jones. So it's straight 3s for Mac Jones to San Francisco. So coming in at number 4 now is Miami, correct?
Number 4 is Atlanta.
Oh, Atlanta. I'm sorry. I had my picks confused. So Atlanta. Atlanta's a very interesting choice because they don't need a quarterback. I do believe they're going to try to hang on to Matt Ryan a little bit longer. After all, they are paying him a lot of money. And their O-line, I mean, it could use a boost. It's not the worst, but it's not the best. They did hold their own pretty good against Kansas City and hell, even against Tampa Bay at one point. But I think that they haven't really been the same since they lost their tight end to Cleveland last offseason?
Yeah.
So I'd say that Atlanta's going to go for Kyle Pitts.
So this is kind of where I deviate a little bit again. Matt Ryan's contract starts looking a little bit movable, I think, next year, the year after. And this is where I think, I think Atlanta is going to get some legit trade offers from teams like New England and some others, maybe even the Denver Broncos, depending on what our initial plans were after targeting a guy like Bridgewater. Since this is a no trade draft, though, I'm actually slating that the Atlanta Falcons go after a comparable quarterback with a little bit more mobility in Zach Wilson.
Ooh, Zach Wilson.
So I think that they're targeting the quarterback of the future in a top-heavy quarterback draft and allow Zach to sit behind Matt Ryan, learn some tools of the trade, and help alleviate what some of the analysts and whatnot are out there are saying that he's a one-read guy. I think he's a little bit more than that, but I still think he has some stuff he needs to polish. And that's why I see Zach Wilson falling down to Atlanta, and I think Atlanta will try to capitalize on that. But I will admit that I had or Kyle Pitts added into that equation just like you did, because, I mean, Pitts is just he's undeniably talented. It is unbelievable.
Yes, I agree. I saw some of his tape, so I totally agree with you on that. And one point that I forgot to make before we started choosing, Albert, and to our audience, we are not discussing trade ups or trade downs. We're just discussing where teams are initially. But it's interesting to get your opinion on it nonetheless, Albert. Thank you so much. So number 5, that's Miami, correct?
That is Bengals.
Oh, Bengals. So Miami is 6.
Miami is 6. Detroit is 7. Carolina is 8.
We're 9. And
we're
then
9, and Dallas is number 10.
Okay. So Cincinnati, very interesting choice. Now, Rich, you remember our very special guest who we had a couple of weeks ago, Sean Moore, who will be the special guest superfan announcer for round 5 of the NFL draft. So, congratulations to our friend Sean Moore on having that honor of getting to announce the pick for the Bengals.
He's got a sweet outfit all lined up. He's got like awesome like pants with like it's so cool. I'm not gonna lie, obviously I'm a Broncos fan, but man, is that he's got one sweet little kind of clothing kind of lined up, and he's got his big hat on too, which is gonna be awesome. But he had some really interesting takes on the Bengals. Curious as to whether or not you're going to follow what he believes they're going to go with, or if we think that they're going to go in a slightly different direction. So what do you think they're going to go with?
Well, you know what? I've actually put this into a lot of thought, and I thought that the Bengals losing AJ Green was a pretty big hit for them, because I started kind of watching highlights of how Andy Dalton and AJ Green at the prime of his career was just, it was kind of like watching almost Matt Stafford and Calvin Johnson. Like, you could do no wrong. All Dalton had to do was chuck the ball and let AJ Green do the rest.
Zip code.
Yeah. So while a lot of people are predicting that the Bengals are going to go tackle to try to protect Joe Burrow and give him a little bit more time in the pocket, I'm actually going to go a different route, and I'm going to say that the Bengals are going to take a wide receiver, and I think they're going to take Jamar Chase.
That was my original pick for them.
Mm-hmm.
I have since changed my mind, and I believe that as much as Sean loves their current tackle situation, I think that the Cincinnati Bengals understand that you can't have a quarterback that is clearly a top tier quarterback in the NFL in Burrow. I mean, he came in as a rookie and he did not look like a rookie. He looked composed in that pocket. And I also believe that a lot of the wide receivers that are coming out of college now, and there's a fairly good chunk of them that are all clumped together with similar skill sets. I think they can get a solid wide receiver in round 2, maybe even another guy in round 3 if they really want to like double down on that position. I believe that the Bengals are going to be looking at some of the injuries that they had at the tackle positions and say, we can't have our franchise quarterback get hurt like that. And my pick for the Bengals is Penei Sewell.
Penei Sewell. Now, I do apologize to you, Penei, if I mispronounce your name or not write it correctly. I'm sorry.
Well, I wrote P. Sewell because I wasn't even going to go there.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I just wrote it the way I hear it in my head. But
Right.
I totally agree with your choice there, and that was my initial choice. And I would have said Penei Sewell had the Bengals not traded away AJ Green, but now that he's gone, it's kind of like I don't know. I just think that Joe Burrow needs that guy that can take pressure off of if they do go wide receiver, let's say, for example, then it'll give the second and third wide receivers,
Right.
that chance to kind of take advantage of it. So Chad Marsalis, he says Jamar Chase as well. So thank you and welcome to the show, Chad, by the way. Thank you for watching, my friend. I do apologize if falling behind on the comments. I'm trying to do 2 things at once. Kenneth Booker, thank you, my friend. He says, did you see the Deshaun Watson elementary talent show video I sent you? No, I have not. I haven't seen it yet, Kenneth, but I promise you I will check it out after the show. But I pretty much like or laugh at everything you said me. So I do appreciate you taking the time, my friend. And Boggins also agrees with you, and he says Penei Sewell. So
No, that was him trying to help you spell.
Oh, Penei. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. He. I don't think he agrees with me at all.
And that's exactly how I spelled.
I'm pretty sure that was him helping you out spell. I want to make sure that we're representing Boggins' opinion correctly.
All right. I do apologize, Boggins, but that's exactly how I spelled Penei. So I'm glad. So moving on to number 6, the Miami Dolphins. And I've actually thought about this for a while too. And I actually thought about Miami could use they could have used another good tight end like Kyle Pitts, but they do have Gesicki, and Gesicki is not the worst tight end, but he's like the in between. He's a good tight end. He's not the best, but I think that if you're going to give Tua Tagovailoa a second shot of I know I
speaking of spelling issues, eh?
Yeah. So the pretty much the training wheels are off. There's no doubting about it. There's no more Fitz magic. He's gone. There's no more, hey, let's rotate quarterbacks. That dog and pony show is over. So now it's the Tua show. It's going to be either, sink or swim. And I think that the Dolphins are going to go with Devontae Smith, the Heisman winner, because he's going to come in and try to help, make Tua look good and, give the Buffalo Bills, the current division champions, a run for their money.
Right. So the way that I've drafted, so my draft so far was Lawrence, Fields, Jones, Wilson, and then Sewell. So Kyle Pitts is still on my board. And so for the Miami Dolphins, I have them selecting Kyle Pitts. Now, I realize that there is a number of folks out there, and frankly, I could see them going a different way as well in selecting a Bama wide receiver, someone that Tua is familiar with. I had them going with Pitts because I think pairing Gesicki and Pitts together is kind of what some of the folks like Boggins, I think, were kind of talking about. Like, imagine pairing like a Kyle Pitts and a Noah Fant together. Good luck, right? Is basically what, we were saying as a team. And I don't disagree with that assessment either. I just think that Miami's going to look at a guy like Kyle Pitts sitting on that board and Tua and say, I mean, if you can't make that guy catch the ball, we need to find another quarterback. And I think that they're going to go with Kyle Pitts because he provides them with both red zone, inline blocking when they need it. And he is a better tight end even than the guy they have now. And the guy they have now isn't half bad either.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Guys in the chat, let us know who you think the Dolphins are going to pick before we move on to number 7.
And I just want to thank Kenneth Booker for jumping in. Like, share, make sure you subscribe, and especially on YouTube, guys. The more YouTube subscribers we get, the more likely we are to show up higher in your suggestions and other people's suggestions to help grow the show. So we really do appreciate your support and helping us with liking and subscribing. Thank you.
Right, I totally agree. And, kind of just to backtrack, because I didn't see this before we moved on, Kenneth Booker, he adds that Joe Burrow had a connection with Boyd last time I watched him. And he's right, he did. But you also kind of want to bring in another guy, and Boggins also added that he had Boyd and T. Higgins. T. Higgins, I liked what I saw from him, but I don't think that I saw enough out of T. Higgins where it's like, oh my God, he's going to go out and, run a route. So we have to, I don't think he did enough to draw double coverage, basically. So I believe if you bring in another wide receiver, then you give yourself room, not just room, but you also give yourself depth. Because one thing that kind of lingers and haunts the Bengals is just injuries. So hopefully that's something that they can get just out of from under. Chad Marsalis says Kyle Pitts if he's there. Mr. Boggins also said Pitts as well. Albert says Dollies get a running back.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about the Dolphins trying to target Najee Harris for the dual running back and pass catching ability, and I could probably see something like that as well. It's just you have to figure out if Kyle Pitts is there and you have Najee Harris on the board. I'm not unsure that Najee might not be back at the Dolphins' second first round pick. Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, man, can you imagine if they draft Pitts and Harris in round 1? Whew.
Oh, that's crazy. So with that being said, folks, let's move on to the 7th team with the 7th round pick, and that is the Detroit Lions. Now, if you guys haven't seen, we had my brother on the show a couple of weeks ago as well, who was a really diehard Lions fan. And unfortunately, he wasn't too happy with their number 1 selection last season. And if you ask him, I'm pretty sure he'll tell you more bad things than good. So, I was actually thinking, I changed my answer on this like at least once or twice, And, speaking of which, there's my brother right there. He says, Burrow dies if they select Jamar Chase. So.
Now, is that him hoping that they eventually get rid of him so the Lions take him, or?
It could be. I mean, the Lions do need a wide receiver. So, especially seeing as how they lost 2 or maybe 3 of their, Kenny Golladay got a really big contract up with the Giants. Me personally, I think the Giants overpaid for Kenny Golladay, but then again, I mean, who knows? Maybe in a different offensive scheme, he can turn out to be that wide receiver that gets paid all that money. But, if it was still Matt Stafford in Detroit, I'd totally agree and say that the Lions need a wide receiver because Matt Stafford knows how to work around the offensive line that he has. But unfortunately, Matt Stafford went to Los Angeles, and now the Lions are stuck with one. I can't think of his name. So what's the quarterback's name for Detroit? I can't think of his name, Rich.
I honestly can't remember either. Where's your brother?
Yeah, he'll remind me. But either way, you're gonna have to do something better to protect him because the thing that made him a really good quarterback, Goff. Thank you, Jared Goff.
You. Yes.
I was drawing a blank. I was trying to think Super Bowl versus the Patriots. Thank you so much, Kenneth. The thing that made Goff a really good quarterback in terms of where he was playing was the fact that he had a really good O-line. And unfortunately, he's going to get his his behind chased coming into the NFC North, dealing with guys like, Khalil Mack and Danielle Hunter and the Smith brothers in Green Bay. So as much as I want to say the Lions need a wide receiver, if Goff doesn't have time to throw, having a number one wide receiver will probably mean next to nothing. So I'm going to just throw this out there, and it's a wild card shot. It's going out there, and I'm going to say that the Lions select Penei Sewell.
So see, I had him gone on my board already, right? I had him going to the Bengals. So I have Detroit picking kind of a guy that's had some character issues, yet would probably fit the whole biting ankles thing, amongst other things. I have the Detroit Lions selecting Micah Parsons.
Ooh, Micah Parsons.
And I have him going to Detroit there. I think Detroit could use some defensive help. I think having someone who can kind of play that role in their defense would fit what Campbell likes to do. Campbell reminds me of kind of that gritty style, old school coach, but with a more updated new school mentality. As I know, Nando and our audience heard, I absolutely love the Detroit Lions head coach. I think he's spectacular. And what he did in Miami was so underappreciated. And when he kind of stepped in there as the interim coach, which surprised a lot of people because most people didn't think he was going to be able to step in as an interim coach and actually do anything. And he stepped in and did a very solid job. So I have him going defense in round one. And then I think that the Lions are then going to try and bolster one of the two lines in round two, likely the offensive line in round two.
Now, let me ask you, with I'm not questioning why the fact that you chose Micah Parsons, Rich, but I'm trying to wonder, I'm thinking in my head as you were talking, can Micah Parsons come in and turn that defense around and help the Lions become a possible contender for the division? Because one thing that nobody in that division has done so far has been, aside from the 2018 Chicago Bears, who had one of the best defenses in the league to date, has been able to kind of knock Aaron Rodgers off and the Packers in general off that throne. So do you think that if the Lions do go Micah Parsons, is he the guy that can come in and say, okay, we got him now we can go and try to be a contender for the division?
Well, I think Boggins has said already, the short answer to that is no, one player is not going to do that. Because the only player that has that substantial of an impact is a quarterback.
Right.
However, I do think that he can be a piece to step them up, the next level on their defense, because I believe he is a speedy run stopper. So a guy that I kind of see him as is a faster version of Danny Trevathan, except with slightly less instincts, because Danny T had instincts like nobody's business, but Danny was not quite as fast, but his instincts allowed him to get to where the ball was. Whereas Parsons is just so fast, he can get sideline to sideline without breaking much of a sweat. And I think that helps their defense in terms of allowing some flexibility there. I still think they're going to need a coverage guy because as much as people want Parsons to be a coverage linebacker, he's going to have to learn that skill. And I think that's why I said I think the Detroit Lions will then try to bolster the offensive line in round two, because they need so many pieces. They're not one draft away from dethroning the Packers. They're probably 2 drafts away from being able to give that a solid run.
Mr. Boggins adds, Jared Goff went from a loaded roster to Detroit with 0 receivers and young running back, nothing on defense. So, Boggins does make a good point there, Rich. So hopefully the Lions, when it comes to their choice, make a pretty good pick.
Right,
there.
Which is why I selected defensive. Basically, what a lot of people are considering from a speed and size blend, a defensive freak in Micah Parsons, despite character issues. And frankly, that's why I like him going to Detroit, because I don't think Dan Campbell will put up with any nonsense.
Well, the only reason I didn't go defense this year is because, like I said to you, I don't know if we talked about this at the beginning of the show or before we went live, is the fact that Detroit, with the number 1 pick last year, went with Okudah, and Okudah so far has not turned out to be the guy that they expected. So it could be because of the way Matt Patricia was running the team. Who knows? Maybe in the second year, in a different defensive coordinator, what have you, can turn things around. So that's why I think the Lions might not go defensive pick again. But it'll be interesting to see which one of us is.
It's hard to show your player where he needs to go on the field when your pencil's behind your ear.
Well, that's true, but
you got to
for
take the pencil out from behind your ear and actually put something on paper, right?
So that brings us to the number 8 pick, which is Carolina. And we kicked off today's show with the breaking news of them trading away one Teddy Bridgewater to the Broncos, and I mean, obviously, the quarterback is not a big thing for them. Offensively, they do have an emerging. I say emerging Sam Darnold because it could be, maybe under a new offensive coordinating scheme, he could be the next big thing. They have Christian McCaffrey. Their O-line wasn't the best, but it wasn't the worst. I mean, they do have a really good center, and we should know because he left us to go to go there. But your thoughts on this pick, Rich?
I mean, Paradis was nicknamed the Angry Roman, right? So he had honestly, it's great. But so I was split actually when it came to Carolina. And I'm still not 100% certain. So on my board, after I've selected everyone, I still have Trey Lance on the board, and I could absolutely see Carolina maybe not being able to pass up on a quarterback who is, gifted those types of talents. However, I'm going to go in a slightly different direction, and I believe Carolina is going to select cornerback Patrick Surtain.
Ooh. Patrick Surtain. I wanted to get your thoughts on that because I was also thinking defense, and who's the other guy besides Surtain that's highly regarded? Chris Fairley. I couldn't.
No, Caleb. I think his name's Caleb.
Caleb Fairley. Thank you.
But he has the back issues, right? And I'm actually of the opinion that some of the other guys are putting out there. I have family members that have had back challenges. We all play contact sports. I guess a side effect of being kind of the size that we are. And if you end up with a back problem, it's typically not getting better, especially when you decide to hit people at the speed of a car wreck, basically. So
right.
I just don't see that going away fully. Even if he becomes a generational talent, and I know that word is heavily overused, but even if he becomes that kind of top tier cornerback, I think he's likely to start having spotty injuries throughout his career, which will hamper and hinder his ability to really hit those highs that I know he's capable of.
Right. And you know what? I actually, this is probably going to sound weird, but I was actually stuck between both Caleb Fairley and Patrick Surtain. But I believe that while Caleb Fairley does have that injury issue, I don't think it's enough where it would be like, dropping him all the way down to like a lower round type of injury. It could be a concern, but I don't think that anything has been put out there where it would scare teams away from possibly giving him a chance. And Carolina, one thing that they need to sharpen up on is their defense. You saw what the Broncos did to them last season. I mean, Drew Lock had his best game of that season against Carolina, and their defense wasn't bad. It was just that the Broncos knew how to take advantage of it, and they made them look pretty silly. So for me, I'm going to say that the Panthers are going to go with Caleb Fairley. Although, yeah, go ahead.
No, that's fine. I actually, the way I have Fairley looking, I could see someone taking a flyer on him by doing kind of what the Ravens did with maybe Lamar Jackson in the first, where I could see someone try to trade back into, say, pick 32, from in the second rounds, and saying, like, we're willing to risk a guy that looks that good, but we're not willing to pick him like in that top 10, 15 all the way there. So I could see something like that happening with Fairley, because I do believe that a lot of teams are going to be very concerned. Like when you have back surgery that you end up having to have like a special pro day and that kind of stuff, and you're not even at a college yet, at a position where you're expected to both tackle and bat balls down, like on the defensive side, I could actually see him falling as a result of just an abundance of caution, I think, if but nothing else.
No, I totally agree with you. And that brings us to number 9, Rich. And this is a very special number, mind you, because this is where our boys, the Denver Broncos, are up at bat. And you know what? Let me just start off by saying that if you go back in time and you watch any of our old MHRT videos from like almost a year ago, whenever we talked about the draft, I always said inside linebacker. Micah Parsons was one, JOK was another one. And then I met a man named Mr. Boggins, and Mr. Boggins was preaching to me that this draft is pretty heavy on linebackers. So it wasn't necessary for the Broncos to go and get, a Micah Parsons if he was still there, a JOK if he was still there. That there's a lot of inside linebackers who, even if they're not first round caliber players, they're still good linebackers. And I started to believe that as I heard him, because we still have, if Vic Fangio wasn't the coach, I probably wouldn't believe Boggins so much. But, Vic Fangio has done a pretty good job in helping to turn guys into, being the best that they could be. There have been a couple of exceptions to that manner, but when you see what Vic Fangio did, and, it's like a broken record, we say this almost every time on the show, Rich, what he did with the limited amount of defense he had because of all the amounting injuries of last year, I mean, it's just beyond amazing. So, I'm going to roll the dice. I'm going to side with my boy, Marcus, and I'm going to say that the Broncos are going to go, if he's still there, mind you, Justin Fields.
Okay. So I should probably have changed my pick for the Broncos, given what we just did with Teddy Bridgewater.
You can if you want. It's not set in stone yet until I write it.
Oh, it's too late now because I don't like the guy that's left as much. So, sorry. In my opinion, so if you want my truth kind of here is, I want us to trade back from 9, given who's left on my board, and pick up Jenkins at the tackle. But I want us to trade back kind of in that mid kind of tier, like the 15, 17, 18, 19, in that kind of bracket there to get him. And if we get a first for next year as a result of that trade back, then great. So that would mean someone is likely trading up to 9 with us to get Trey Lance, who is the quarterback, given my scenario here, would be the one left that was, worthy, so to speak, of a first round grade. Since I'm not allowed to trade back because them's the rules, then I have us taking Rashad Slater, who will be our future right tackle for the Denver Broncos. When we move on from Juwan James, Slater also provides additional versatility across the offensive line, at least for the short term, in case we have challenges at, for example, if Dalton Reisner continues to struggle at left guard, Slater could potentially help out there as well. And if Cushenberry has or continues to struggle, as he did particularly earlier in the season last year, Slater has played center, although limited, or we could just use him plug and play when we expect Juwan James to get hurt at right tackle again and not want to come back. Sorry.
You know what? I only saw a couple of people in certain mock drafts over the last couple of weeks pick a tackle for the Broncos. I like to think that, our guys that struggled, like Glasgow, and I'm not going to say Cushenberry, because Cushenberry struggled, yes, but he's coming out of his rookie season, so I'm hoping he comes back with some very much improvement.
I agree.
But
I hope he
Dalton
gets better.
Reisner and Glasgow, both of those guys. Reisner, who had a really good 2019,
He did.
came in last year where he had some good games and he had some so-and-so games. So I can understand why you made that selection there, Rich. And, with a guy like a new GM, it's who knows? Because this isn't like Elway, whose hand you could read if you were playing poker with him, and you could literally beat him for all the money he has in his pocket. So
Right. Now with my pick, my ideal offensive line, given who we currently have, it would be Bowles, Reisner, Glasgow, Muti, and then Slater. Now, I think Slater would probably need a little bit of time to adjust to the NFL. So I think James starting at right tackle, despite the fact that he hasn't played in a while, is probably the best move for us anyways.
mhm.
But I really liked what I saw from Moody, and I think that getting him that extra experience in at guard there will help with what Glasgow wanted to say but didn't say in the interview because he stopped himself, which is Moody is the strongest guy he's ever seen, but he's also somewhat rigid as a result of that additional strength that he has. So what Moody needs to start learning is the fluidity required in order to pass pro. And that's what Glasgow wanted. Like, you could see him, he was almost about to say it, and he goes, "No, I'm going to be nice," and and all that kind of stuff. So I think what he was basically trying to get at was Moody needs to learn to be more fluid, and that will help him in his pass protection blocking. And that really probably comes with a combination of both coaching and playtime.
I agree, my friend. And rounding out the last pick number 10, which is the Dallas Cowboys, the so-called America's team. So, with that being said, I would probably say, I keep telling you, Rich, I watch a lot of Undisputed, and they always hype up that Jerry Jones is really high on Kyle Pitts. And, I got to agree that sometimes with Unk that the number one thing that the Cowboys need is a defense. They need defensive players. But on the other hand, the thing that makes that, or I should say that made Dallas so good in 2016 was their offensive line. So, and we're starting to see that without an offensive line, Ezekiel Elliott is not as good as he was. He's mediocre. He's like Melvin Gordon-ish, I guess you could say. And Dak Prescott, and I say that because of the fumbles.
Mm-hmm.
And Dak Prescott, if you don't protect him, we already saw what happened. And even though it was a freak injury against the Giants, it was an injury that shouldn't happen, that can happen just as easily if you don't protect Dak Prescott, especially now that he's worth a lot of money. Obviously not Patrick Mahomes money, but if he goes down hard, that's pretty much the Cowboy season right there. So for me, Rich, I'm going to say that the Cowboys go Rashawn Slater.
So Slater was gone on my board. I do not disagree with your take. Now, the big question here is which of the Joneses is in charge? Because if it's Jerry, then he's just going to try and pick another wide receiver to solve his defensive problems. Because, that's what Jerry loves to do. Now, I agree with you. I think that if the Dallas Cowboys are objective, I think that they would go offensive line here, and I think they would go with Creedy. Was it the center, or they would go with someone else similar to that to shore up that interior portion of the offensive line. Now, I have them going in a slightly different direction because I think the Dallas Cowboys can somewhat make do with what they have at the offensive line position and pick up probably the interior guys in round 2. Even if they need to trade up into round 2 to get some of those interior guys, I have the Dallas Cowboys shoring up an area that has been awful for a number of years, and that is Jace Horn.
Jace Horn. Is that J.C. Horn or
J.C. Horn? Yeah, sorry, too many E's at the end. I just called him Jace just for whatever. I Jaycee. So pronounce that how you like. I'm going to call him Jace. Or JC, if that's how you're supposed to pronounce it.
So just refresh my memory. What position does J.C. Horn play?
Cornerback, I believe.
Cornerback. Okay, so he's like the third third name quarterback under Fairley and Patrick Surtain?
He's in. There's a few of them that are in that like grouping that's right below those two. There's a couple of them that are in that cluster there.
Mm-hmm.
Horn is by most the next guy up.
Oh, okay. I'm just trying to, because I've heard that name, but I don't know what position he played.
He's fast. He's got a lot of the skill sets that you're looking for. That kind of stuff. It's just there's a grouping of people that have a couple of the other guys above him. I happen to think he's the next one off the board. I just think he has too many skill sets that it's undeniable. He's undeniably talented.
Yeah, you know what the funny thing is, Rich? Looking back at your picks and my picks, not one of us. Well, actually, I take that back. Only you picked an inside linebacker, and you picked that for the Lions. I didn't pick a single linebacker to go top 10. So we have some really interesting choices here for top 10. But let's kind of just concentrate on the Broncos one, since obviously this is a Broncos podcast. So sure. Obviously you said Rashawn Slater, and I said Justin Fields. So I just kind of want to explain to our viewers that didn't tune in at the beginning of the show why I think the Broncos are going to go Justin Fields if he's still on the board, and not just because Boggins convinced me of it, but just simply for the
did.
Yeah. Aside from that, just for the fact that when the Seahawks in 2012 they signed Matt Flynn to a big contract, and then they went ahead and signed and then drafted, I should say, Russell Wilson, and then later on the Eagles signed what's his name? Can't think of his name right. What's his name? Sam Bradford. Thank you, Sam Bradford. And then they went on and drafted Carson Wentz. So if Justin Fields does get signed, obviously, and Drew Lock is still on the team, Fields would more than likely be quarterback number 3. If Drew Lock gets dealt elsewhere, for a corner, for a draft pick or what have you, then obviously Fields would be quarterback number 2. I don't really see the Broncos giving him position over Teddy Bridgewater if it was just Bridgewater and Fields, in terms of quote unquote see who's going to start at training camp. But it does make for a very interesting situation should it happen.
So what I want and what has just happened are kind of two different things, and that's kind of where my mock kind of derailed a little bit. When they took in Bridgewater, he will provide legitimate competition for Drew Lock. Perhaps not a bad thing, but it'll also kind of force Drew to continuously look over his shoulder, which I just don't think is a good thing for any quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Especially one who's now got consistency with the same OC year over year. So an interesting fact is that Drew's only year in college where he ended up with the same offensive coordinator, that was his best year that he had at Mizzou, right? Mm-hmm. Was when he had the same OC for the only time in his college career, back-to-back years, and that was his best season. So I personally did not want us to pick up a journeyman veteran quarterback unless it was someone who was a clear-cut, like, above Drew, which would basically, beyond a shadow of a doubt, bump him down to QB2. We never did that. Teddy is kind of, when you look at the statistics and stuff, he's kind of like a modestly better version of Drew Lock when it comes to like completion percentage and a couple other statistics. Mm-hmm. But on all of the other ones, it's kind of average. So Teddy's completion percentage, I think, was somewhere in like the 65 percentile, give or take, if I'm not mistaken. And Drew's was not nearly that good. So, there's a few modest kind of statistical differences between the two, but when it came to things like touchdowns and interceptions and stuff like that, Drew was obviously one of the worst in the league at that, but then Teddy wasn't that much far behind him. I think it was like 16-11 for Teddy Bridgewater, and I think it was like 17-16 for Drew Lock or something. So you're not talking major statistical differences between the two quarterbacks. And that's what my problem is that you basically have two very similar quarterbacks, which is going to force one quarterback to constantly look over their shoulder at the other. So I drafted Slater because I believe that our right tackle situation is going to become a real need at the end of this particular season with Juwan James. Juwan James, since he's been in Denver, has also not played a complete season for us. And he also had an issue in his first season with us where he refused to come back on the field after he was medically cleared to come and play. So I have just a legitimate concern that we need a right tackle, and there's a good chance that we may need Slater to step in this year potentially. And I love Anderson. I really do. I thought he came in and played amazing when Garrett Bowles was hurt. However, flipping technique from the left side to the right side is not an easy thing. And even though Anderson literally looked like he could step in for Bowles at a moment's notice, which is amazing. So he's a good insurance policy because both tackle positions are important. I just think that Slater coming in with his experience at right tackle is going to be a better fit for us long-term and protecting any quarterback that we bring in, including a rookie.
So, that's very well said, my friend. So to close out the show, Rich, what grade would you give our GM just solely for the quarterback acquisition of Teddy Bridgewater?
I have 2 grades, and I'm not trying to play cop-out here, but I have 2 grades.
Mm-hmm.
If we trade Drew Lock and draft a quarterback, then I'm going to give that like an A- B+. Because if the team has made decisions that Drew Lock is not our guy, then we need to trade him, get capital back, and then Teddy Bridgewater was then a very good pick for us. So I will give credit where credit's due when it comes to that as a strategy, because I actually agree with that strategy. And again, that fits into what my narrative has always been, and I posted publicly on Twitter, so you can fact check me all you want. I hate quarterback competitions, and I think that having Teddy Bridgewater as a backup to a rookie quarterback is a good thing. Because I don't see that as a competition, because then Bridgewater is basically put in this place as being the backup, and the future is the rookie quarterback that we draft in the first round.
Mm-hmm.
If we bring Bridgewater in as a true quarterback competition, then I'm basically grading this as like a C- D+, because I just think that approach never works. So why would you do it?
Right. Well, me personally, I do like the selection. I love that he only used the 6th round pick, and the fact that he is only paying $3 million plus a $1.5 million bonus for a veteran guy. It kind of, to me, gives a veteran like an insurance policy of sorts if Denver doesn't go quarterback. So it actually opens up Denver's window of possibilities where they're not just, forced to go quarterback. It takes away the predictability, in other words. So they're free to go and get whoever's the best player available in that spot. So me personally, I'm going to give George Paton an A because I thought it was a great move. It was a job well done. And whether or not Justin Fields lands in Denver, whoever the Broncos pick at number 9, I think it's a job well done. So with that being said, Rich, we're out of time. Thank you guys so much for watching us. That's going to do it for our show today, guys. Let me just say a quick thank you to Shadowjacker, The Boss, Mundungus, Boggins, Albert. I'm going to try to go as quick as I can. Shadowjacker, Kenneth Booker, Travis Tarbox, Miguel, Chad, and Muhammad, and anybody who I may have missed, Orlando, Josh. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'm sorry if I missed anybody else. Please make sure to watch a very special, Vic, of course, thank you so much. Please make sure to watch tomorrow's very special episode of Mile High Roundtable that will air right after the end of the very first round of the NFL draft. Guys, to our audio listeners that are listening to us after the fact, please make sure to subscribe and, give us a like and follow on Anchor or Google or wherever it is you're watching us from. If you're on Anchor, you want to be a monthly supporter of the show, we really appreciate that so much. Rich, anything to add before we go, my friend?
No, just at the very end of all this, I just want to say thank you all for joining us live. It was awesome having you here and, input and questions. And, the great thing about the world here is we can all agree to disagree and still all get along at the end of it. And I just want to say, please like and subscribe and share. We are always looking to try and increase the Broncos fans that are with us in the chat. The more, the merrier. So if you can subscribe on YouTube, like the video when you watch it, and retweet and share on Twitter as well. And the same thing on Facebook. It really does help the show, and it really helps us grow our audience and have more people just like you come into the chat and join us. So I wanted to thank you very much and have yourself a great night. Go Broncos.
Yes, of course. And let me just quickly add, follow at MHRT Podcast on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Myself at A6'10" Mexican. My co-host at Richie. And let me just, Biggie Bronco coming in, at the last minute. Teddy Bridgewater's best years, he only threw 14 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. So we have that to end the show. And let me just reiterate before we go, folks, make sure to tune in and watch the Mile High Roundtable of first round analysis of tomorrow's picks. We'll make sure you join the boss, Mondungus Creevy, our good friend Glenn Hauser, and our good friend Mr. Boggins as well as myself, who will be on the show. And we will have other guests, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. So please make sure to follow up and check on that. So for my co-host, Rich, I'm Adan Diaz. Thank you so much, guys, and we will see you all next time.